Hey everyone, let's imagine that today is February 10th and we're in San Salvador, the capital of El Salvador. Thousands of people have gathered in front of the presidential palace celebrating a huge win. This big moment, it's all about Nayib Bukele, the current president who just nailed his re-election in the first round of the country's presidential elections. It's like a new chapter for El Salvador, a country that's really struggling with gang violence and serious economic challenges. President Nayib Bukele has made some bold and pretty controversial moves, like making Bitcoin legal tender. That's a world first. It looks like the people of El Salvador are really digging what Bukele is doing. He got reelected with over 80% of the vote. In his victory speech, Bukele pointed out that winning in the first round like this is something that's never happened before in El Salvador. But not everyone's a fan of Bukele, both at home and abroad. Critics are calling him out for some authoritarian tendencies. He even likes to call himself the cool dictator. And let's not forget, his recent re-election kind of goes against El Salvador's constitution, which says a president can't serve back-to-back terms. But then again, some argue that an 80% win kind of makes it okay, even if all the formal steps weren't exactly followed. Today on GA Crypto, we're diving into Nayib Bukele's story and trying to objectively discuss his impact on El Salvador. From Bitcoin City to tackling gang violence, we'll look at how his policies are affecting the economy and crime in the country. And we won't shy away from the complicated political scene and the criticisms he's facing. All right, let's get into it. Nayib Bukele, born July 1981 in San Salvador, comes from a well-off entrepreneurial family. His dad, a highly respected businessman, founded several companies in different industries, teaching his son all about the business world. All right, let's talk about Nayib Bukele's early career. After studying law at the Central American University in San Salvador, Bukele made his first appearance as the mayor of Nuevo Cuscatlán in 2012. He was part of the Farabundo Martí Nacional Liberation Front, FMLN, back then. So the FMLN is a left-wing political party in El Salvador, named after the revolutionary leader Farabundo Martí. This party emerged from the Salvadorian Civil War and became a legal political entity after the 1992 peace accords. The FMLN usually backs progressive policies like land reform, social equality, workers' rights, and access to social services. They're on the left side of the political spectrum, advocating for social justice and inclusion. To really get Nayib Bukele's current politics and to understand El Salvador, we need to spend a bit more time on the country's situation up until the late 70s. Back then, deep political, economic, and social tensions had been building up for decades. El Salvador was marked by huge economic inequalities, with a small elite owning most of the land and wealth, while the vast majority lived in extreme poverty. Since the 1930s, the country was under the thumb of a military and economic oligarchy. They kept their power through political repression and violence against any opposition, probably inspired by leftist revolutions in South America and Cuba. Similar movements started forming in El Salvador in the 60s, including the FMLN, in response to social injustice and political repression. In 1980, the government tried to implement agrarian reforms to redistribute land to poor farmers. But this move was not well received by the agricultural elites and led to increased tensions. These political tensions soon escalated into an armed conflict in the late 70s, with acts of violence from both sides, including political assassinations, village massacres, and armed clashes between the government army and rebel groups. After years of negotiation, a peace agreement was finally signed in January 1992 in Chapultepec, Mexico, between the Salvadorian government and the FMLN. This peace deal had several key points, like disarming rebel groups, turning the Salvadorian army into a more professional national security force, and implementing various political, economic, and social reforms to boost democracy and human rights. So this is the backdrop against which Nayib Bukele grew up, and it's really important to keep this in mind to understand his journey. Bukele really dove into the deep end of politics in 2015, when he was elected mayor of San Salvador, the country's capital. At that time, he was part of a coalition between the FMLN and the Salvadorian Progressive Party. During his tenure, he introduced policies and initiatives that became his signature style, like launching a public security system to tackle crime in a city and country plagued by gangs. In 2017, Bukele was kicked out of the FMLN, his longtime party, due to internal disagreements. So, in October 2017, he founded his own party called Nuevas Ideas, which means new ideas in Spanish. This party firmly rejects the traditional left-right labels and positions itself as focused on fighting corruption and being anti-establishment. There's another version of the story that paints Nayib Bukele as a savvy political strategist who used the FMLN as a stepping stone to win the mayorship of San Salvador. This could explain why he chose to run for president with his own party. Between these two versions, it's totally up to you to decide which one makes more sense. Nuevas Ideas adopted a communication strategy often labeled as populist, targeting young voters heavily on social media. This was a pretty smart move considering that young people make up the majority of voters in El Salvador, where the average age of the population is 27. On June 1st, 2019, at just 37 years old, Nayib Bukele was elected president of El Salvador with 53% of the votes. His campaign mainly focused on fighting corruption, combating crime, especially the gang issue, and revitalizing the country's economy. Again, to put everything in context, El Salvador had the world's highest homicide rate per capita, surpassing countries like Jamaica, Lesotho, Honduras, and Belize. In 2020, Nayib Bukele and his Nuevas Ideas party didn't have a legislative majority, so they struggled to get their laws passed, especially a specific loan meant to fund a comprehensive security plan. Facing this blockade, in the assembly, Bukele ordered armed soldiers to enter the legislative chamber to pressure the deputies. This move by Bukele to bring armed soldiers into the legislative chamber was, unsurprisingly, widely criticized both nationally and internationally. Now, the big question is, did the ends justify the means? That's a topic for debate, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. We're definitely curious to hear about them. But as you'll see later on, Bukele definitely achieved his goals in terms of international security, and he seemed to need this law to make things happen. In his defense, it can be argued that this action was in service of his security law for the benefit of the country and not for personal gain. But on the judicial front, Bukele also made his presence felt. In 2021, under his direction, the parliament voted to unilaterally replace the 5 judges of the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Court and the Attorney General. Again, voices were raised accusing him of undermining the separation of powers. This major judicial overhaul later served Bukele, as the new chamber decided that the sitting president could exceptionally run for re-election in 2024. Despite the constitutional prohibition against consecutive terms, Nayib Bukele's goal was clear: to rid the country of corruption and cartels, and to boost its economy. On March 27, 2022, a state of emergency was declared in El Salvador, following a series of homicides that left 87 victims. The state of emergency suspended key constitutional rights and relaxed rules on arrests. Originally meant to last only a month, it was extended for over 20 months, and is still in place at the time of writing this. Since the state of emergency was imposed, about 77,000 people have been arrested, which is more than 1% of El Salvador's total population. Amnesty International reported in 2022 serious human rights violations, and in 2023, they documented mostly arbitrary arrests, ill treatment, acts of torture, and at least 132 deaths of individuals who hadn't been found guilty of any criminal offense. Now, let's make an interesting parallel with Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, literally meaning father of modern Turkey. We bring this up because we think it provides a different perspective on Bukele and his way of reforming the country. So, to get into it, one person on the GeoCrypto team has been living in Istanbul for over 6 months and has had the chance to discuss Turkish history and particularly a Turk story with the locals. And it's quite fascinating. Atatürk came to power in the 1920s in a context marked by the end of the Ottoman Empire and the consequences of the Turkish War of Independence against foreign occupying forces, notably the victorious Allied powers of World War I, Greece, France, Italy, and the United Kingdom. These powers had divided the remains of the Ottoman Empire in the 1920 Treaty of Sèvres, assigning Turkish territories to foreign powers and supporting ethnic secessionist movements, particularly in West Anatolia. The Turkish nationalists, led by this guy Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, did something pretty remarkable. They managed to bring together a huge chunk of the Turkish population, rallying them under one flag. They stood strong against foreign occupation forces and separatist movements. And guess what? Their efforts paid off big time. They successfully established the Republic of Turkey in 1923. Turkey in the early 20th century faced substantial challenges. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the nation's leader, embarked on a series of sweeping reforms to reshape Turkey into a secular, democratic, and modern republic. One of the most significant changes during Ataturk's reforms in the 1920s was the complete overhaul of the Turkish language and alphabet. In a bold move in 1928, the Arabic alphabet was replaced with the Latin alphabet. This change had profound effects on Turkish society. It simplified literacy for the masses, strengthened national unity, fostered a cohesive Turkish identity, and eased linguistic barriers with the Western world. Turkish, as it's spoken today, is a relatively recent development, blending elements of Arabic and some French, among other influences. It's important to note that these reforms were initially met with resistance. Imagine the challenge of adapting to an entirely new language and alphabet overnight. Ataturk, however, firmly believed in the necessity of these reforms and implemented them decisively. Until his death in 1938, Ataturk maintained a strong control over the government and society in Turkey, ensuring the implementation of various other reforms. Although Ataturk, in his efforts to transform Turkey, often resorted to methods that today would be considered highly authoritarian and not very democratic, particularly in dealing with opposition. And yet, even today, nearly a century after his passing, every year, the whole country just stops to remember him. And when we say stop, we literally mean stop. On November 10th at 9:05 a.m., cars come to a screeching halt. Everyone gets out, stands up, and observes a minute of silence. Completely surreal. The level of admiration and respect for this guy in Turkey is absolutely incredible. The Turks are unanimous about it. Ataturk saved their country. And as the saying goes, you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. But now, back to Bukele. Before he started his crackdown on gangs, Nayib Bukele made international headlines for a completely different reason: making Bitcoin legal tender. At the 2021 Bitcoin Miami conference, the Salvadorian president announced his plan to make Bitcoin a legal currency in his country. Just a few days after this announcement, on June 9th, El Salvador's Legislative Assembly voted in favor of the Bitcoin law. And then, on September 7th, 2021, despite all the opposition, it became official. Bitcoin was declared one of the official currencies of El Salvador. This was a world first. For Bukele, Satoshi Nakamoto's creation, Bitcoin, serves several purposes. First off, he's banking on Bitcoin to financially revive the country. This includes attracting international capital and a national mining program, which we'll get into in just a sec. Bukele also sees Bitcoin as a way to help the 70% of Salvadorians who don't have bank accounts. Plus, he views it as an opportunity to break away from the American dominance in the country, especially since the US dollar has been the national currency since 2001. While working on the legislative side of the Bitcoin law, President Bukele also revealed his plan to make El Salvador a key player in Bitcoin mining. His idea: set up a bunch of mining farms powered by geothermal energy from the country's 196 volcanoes. This move aims to tap into the country's renewable energy resources while generating economic revenue. Volcano energy is one of the initiatives that sprang up from this project. It's a public-private venture aiming to set up numerous mining farms in El Salvador, powered by renewable energy. The total cost of the project is estimated at $1 billion. Among the investors, we've got big names like Tether, the company behind the USDT stablecoin. In September 2021, President Bukele released a teaser video showing the first Bitcoin mining farm powered by volcanic energy. A few days later, Bukele shared a screenshot on X of a Bitcoin wallet displaying pending mining rewards. The post was accompanied by a message: "We're still testing and installing, but this is officially the first #Bitcoin mining from the #Volcanode." 3 years after this announcement, what's the status? According to our sources, progress has been somewhat slow. It's at a maximum of 5 megawatts right now, which is roughly equivalent to 5 containers. So it's not a lot. Also, the fundraising for the Volcano Energy project was completed in June 2023, which means the infrastructure won't be operational anytime soon. An article mentions that it will take at least 3 to 4 years to finalize the entire project, but it seems to be underway. In November 2021, Bukele also made a big announcement about his plan to build Bitcoin City. The president envisioned a city entirely focused on Satoshi Nakamoto's creation. Like the mining farms, the city is also expected to be powered by geothermal energy from volcanoes. The city is being showcased as a hotbed for tech and finance innovation, aiming to draw in investments and top talent from all over the world, with some sweet tax breaks for crypto and businesses. They've got a hefty budget of $1 billion for this project, and the plan is to fund it through something called volcano bonds. Basically, debt tied to Bitcoin thanks to teaming up with Tether and Bitfinex. The word is, after a few months of waiting, these bonds are about to hit the scene. Supposedly, they're set to launch in the first quarter of 2024 and will be issued on the Bitfinex Securities platform. Now, hold up a sec, because what President Nayib Bukele is doing with his country's debt is seriously breaking the mold. He's throwing the traditional financial system completely out the window. Normally, when a government needs to borrow cash or raise debt on the market, it contacts the major banks and other current financial institutions to issue bonds. These guys, they're called prime dealers, and it's an exclusive club. Their job is to buy up the debt and divvy it out to the rest of the financial world. It's a pretty cushy job, with fat paychecks and virtually no risk. Needless to say, it's not a job just anybody can get. We're talking about heavy hitters like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, BNP, Crédit Agricole, Société Générale, and Deutsche Bank, and the like. The interest rates on the bonds are set prior to purchase by agencies like Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, based on their evaluations. Basically, the more these agencies consider you to be at risk of default, the more you'll pay on the debt. Of course, these three agencies, which are the best known, are headquartered in New York. I won't draw any conclusions, but in the case of Bitcoin bonds, things will be completely different. Bukele is shaking things up by tokenizing his country's debt on Bitcoin. It's an extremely bold move that's got the big players in finance scratching their heads. Bukele and his team called on Blockstream to issue tokenized bonds on the Liquid network, which could then be bought and sold on the Bitfinex crypto exchange platform. iFinex, which owns Bitfinex, will act as a primary dealer, with Blockstream's assistance in tokenizing this debt from El Salvador. Thanks to tokenization, El Salvador's Bitcoin bonds are going to be super easy to trade, with a minimum buy-in of just $100. They're cutting out the middlemen and going straight to the market. This is clearly a revolution in the bond market. It's got a lot of folks rattled. Some are even hoping this whole thing flops. Now, could this be linked to all the buzz El Salvador's been getting in the media lately? Well, I'll definitely leave it to you to ponder. But Bitcoin as an official currency, and now these new bonds, you bet the IMF isn't exactly thrilled. But let's keep it moving. Although part of the country's economy has opened up to Bitcoin, the technology has yet to conquer the entire population. In 2021, Statista's Research Development conducted a survey in El Salvador, the results of which you can see here. Apparently, over 55% of Salvadorians surveyed had no confidence in Bitcoin. More than that, only 5% of the population said that they really trusted it. At the same time, keep in mind that going from nothing at all to Bitcoin is like if we were to offer you a country house on Mars tomorrow. It may all be very well, but as a gut instinct, it's going to take some time before everyone is convinced. In any case, it shows that in terms of popularity, it's not Bitcoin that's pushing Bukele. Rather, it's Bukele who is taking a political risk to push Bitcoin. Many local media outlets are reporting that many Salvadorians are not using Bitcoin despite government incentives. Most would have converted the $30 in BTC offered by the government when creating a Shiva wallet. According to a more recent survey conducted by the University Institute of Public Opinion in January 2024, Salvadorians' use of Bitcoin remains anecdotal. Only 12% of respondents said they had used Bitcoin as a means of payment in 2023. According to yet another study by the Institute, which examined Bukele's record after 4 years in office, 84% of those surveyed felt that Bitcoin hadn't really helped to improve their financial situation. Now, the population doesn't necessarily take a dim view of the asset. As the survey results show, the majority of Salvadorians believe that Bitcoin has neither improved nor worsened the country's economic situation. Only 18% believe that Bitcoin has been detrimental to the Salvadorian economy. Now, are we really surprised by these figures? No. The adoption of a new currency within a country is something fundamentally complicated, especially in a nation with a history like El Salvador's. It will probably take a few more decades for Bitcoin to gradually infiltrate in people's daily lives. Above all, its volatility needs to decrease before it can be used as a currency in the economy. Today, this is simply not tenable, but that doesn't mean it never will be. On the political front, it seems that the fight against gangs has yielded extremely positive results. According to Bukele himself, El Salvador has become one of the safest countries in the world. According to a survey by the University Institute of Public Opinion, Salvadorians' concerns have changed considerably since President Bukele was elected. Prior to 2019, over 70% of respondents considered crime to be the country's main problem, well ahead of the economy or unemployment. Crime, in blue, remains a major problem for only 4.6% of respondents. Another part of Bukele's program was to boost the country's economy. Here, things are a little more complicated. As mentioned previously, the population is worried about the economic situation. The poverty rate is said to have risen from 22.8% to 26.7% since Nayib Bukele's inauguration, as the yellow curve shows. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Since 2020, the world economy has been grappling with the COVID-19 crisis and attempting to recover from its damaging economic fallout. While it's true that poverty appears to have risen in El Salvador, it's really important to keep in mind that this isn't solely the fault of the Salvadorian government. It's also influenced by the broader macroeconomic conditions at play. Bukele's gamble on Bitcoin might just be the lifeline El Salvador needs to break free from its financial struggles. By investing heavily in BTC, Bukele has essentially transformed his country into a hedge fund. While it's definitely a risky move, the potential for profit is high. On the other hand, if Richard and his data factory friends were asked for their opinion, an even better bet would be investing in mining, and above all, in the country's energy development. Bukele knows this very well, but it's an investment that takes much longer because it involves production infrastructure and networks. So, the Bitcoin City and Volcano bonds are a step in the right direction. What really matters now is making this transformation work. It's an immense challenge, no doubt about it. But we've got to remember not to get too caught up in the hype of Bitcoin itself. The real focus here is on energy and human development in El Salvador. That's what we need to keep our eyes on. But as they say in El Salvador, we cut wood with saws. So far, Bukele's career has been defined by remarkable success. Nayib Bukele is a president with a complex background, making bold moves in El Salvador, from adopting Bitcoin to implementing tough security measures against gangs. His presidency is a mix of stark contradictions, blending tech innovation with political controversy. By embracing Bitcoin as a legal tender, he's put El Salvador on the map as a crypto trailblazer, earning both praise and skepticism. Yet his hardline stance against gangs has led to a drop in crime, but it's also raised concerns about human rights and democracy. This dual approach reflects the challenge of a leader trying to reshape his country while grappling with issues of authoritarianism. It does beg the question, what's the true cost of progress and security? For that, only time will tell, as history judges President Bukele's decisions.